This video is brought to you by the Auram's Comics patrons. You know what to do. Spider-Man Homecoming, more like Spider-Man. Whoa, it's pretty good. You should watch it come into a theater near you. Hello and welcome to... I'm Auram, and today we're going to be talking about Spider-Man Homecoming because, you know, it came out last week, and I went to RTX, so I couldn't get my review out in time like I normally do. But it's here now. Better late than never, I always say. Let's start the review. Alright, so the way I structure my reviews normally is I talk about what I liked about it, what I didn't like about it, and then I get into spoilers, so don't worry, those of you who haven't seen it. I know it's been a week, but still, I will have a very large spoiler warning before we actually get into that part, so don't worry. We're just going to start with an overall review of the movie. So yeah, overall, this movie was super great, and I know I'm not alone in saying that, but I personally loved it. It was a surprisingly good character movie, which is something that I didn't really expect, and it had a lot of great focus on some really rad supporting characters. Ned, Peter's friend, and Michelle, Peter's kind of friend, definitely stand out in that regard. Michelle, more so, was really great, and I'll talk about her a little more later, but I really loved how they used her. I was a little skeptical on Zendaya being cast in this movie at first, because my only experience with her was years ago as a child watching her on the Disney Channel, and I don't remember her being an incredible actor, but she just steals every scene she's in this movie, and I love Zendaya so much now, so yay. A little bit about Michael Keaton as the Vulture. Holy shit, he was real good. He's a scary boy. That Michael Keaton, he's a good actor, but man, this is the only time I've ever liked the Vulture. I notoriously hate the Vulture because he's always written really lame, and not like the Shocker where the point of his villain is that he's lame, but like it's like melodrama. It's like anime melodrama, but in comics is what the Vulture is normally. But here it works, and it's not even like melodrama because they changed his character a bunch, which I'll get into in a little bit. But they did a lot of very neat and perfect things with Vulture's character that I super enjoyed. And of course, Michael Keaton's performance, as always, is fantastic. Another character that was super great that wasn't like the main character was Marissa Tomei as Aunt May. She was fantastic. We didn't see a lot of her in Civil War. We saw more of her here, which, I mean, obviously, she's more in the Spider-Man mythos. I don't think I have to explain that. But she's great here. She's not quite the ultimate version of Aunt May, which is my personal favorite version of Aunt May. I'm not a fan of, like, the geriatric old Aunt May, which is definitely the one we got in Raimi's Spider-Man films, and kind of a melding of Ultimate and old Aunt May was in Amazing Spider-Man, and I just, like, barely remember her at all. But Marissa Tomei here was great. She's fantastic. Also, side note, I know that, like, the joke when she was cast as Aunt May was, like, she's too hot to be Aunt May. She's too young, too hot. Get her out of here. She's supposed to be an old, disheveled lady. And I was like, yeah, she's fine, whatever. But then in this movie, I don't know if it was wardrobe or just the way she carried herself, but Marissa Tomei she's a beautiful boy. Anyway, cast as a whole is really what shines in this movie. There really isn't a weak link at all here. Everyone brought their A game, especially Tom Holland. I mean, he had to, it's his movie, but there are certain scenes that I will talk about a little later that he just shines in very well. And yeah, just the whole cast here is the star of the movie. They should have, for the top billing, they should have combined every cast member's name into one giant, long name. And that's the only actor listed on IMDb and in the credits. Other than the characters and the cast and acting just being great, the movie is all sorts of good in other areas. There's a lot of really small cameos and references that obviously just don't inherently make a movie better, but as a comic book movie, they're very nice to see, and they definitely got the huge grin out of me, which, by the way, side note, for like the first 20 minutes of this movie, I could not stop smiling. It's just, there was a combination of like the little music. It was, this isn't really a spoiler, in the Marvel Studios opening credits, they infused the da-na-na, da-na-na Spider-Man theme in there, and that was like, that had me smiling so big. And then just everything after that, it was just a fun time. This movie made me really happy, is what I'm trying to say. By the way, Spider-Man is like my third favorite superhero when done right, so a little bit of a bias here. There's a lot of awesome cuts in, like, just cuts and shots in the first little bit of this movie, especially when Peter is just being Peter and not Spider-Man, which is interesting. It creates a sense of urgency in the first little bit that's almost Edgar Wright style without diving too far into that, and it was fun. The cinematography was played with in a very interesting way in the first act, which I enjoyed a lot. Everything's great in this movie, just overall. I loved it a lot. Iron Man in here was also good, and he wasn't like the main... Robert Downey Jr. didn't like steal the movie away from Tom Holland, basically. They shared the screen equally, and how it should be in like a small cameo crossover role that it would be in the comics. So that I really appreciated how they handled that. Overall, I mean, it's definitely my favorite Spider-Man movie. I was never the hardcore fan of the Raimi trilogy. Well, I don't think anyone's a super hardcore fan of Spider-Man 3, but I was never a super big fan of those. Spider-Man 2 is overrated, in my opinion. It's a good movie. It's just not the pinnacle of superhero movies, like a lot of people say. So I don't know. I might be a bit biased. It might just be a strange opinion of mine. I also don't think Amazing Spider-Man and Amazing Spider-Man 2 are trash garbage. They're definitely not great, but they're not awful. I would put them along the same lines of like the first Thor, and then Spider-Man 3. Spider-Man 3, if you view it as a Spider-Man movie, that's like Thor the Dark World material. Spider-Man 3, if you view it as a comedy, is like Winter Soldier material. That's all I'm saying. Spider-Man 3 is incredible. If you just rewire your brain to think that it's a comedy, then it's fucking great. It's perfect. But anyway, that's what I liked about the movie in overall review. Still not getting into spoilers, but we're going to move on a little bit into what I didn't like about the movie. So I pretty much liked most of what the movie had to offer here. The third act struggles, as most Marvel movies nowadays do, and most superhero movies do, where they kind of are just playing in their own world, and then the third act comes along, and it just devolves into superhero generic fare, which is pretty much Ant-Man's biggest flaw. Is that the first two acts are like heist comedy, and then the third act is just superhero blockbuster movie times. And it's not as bad in Spider-Man in Homecoming here, but it's definitely noticeable. And other than that, I guess you could kind of complain about there not being like a lot of huge Spider-Man moments in this, which is subjective, obviously, because what is a Spider-Man moment? But like the most glaring one is that there's not really a web-swinging scene, like a big, like the first 10 minutes of Amazing Spider-Man 2 are that huge web-swinging going through New York scene. There's nothing really like that in Homecoming, but it didn't really bother me. Nothing stood out in this movie as being like, well, where's this? And this is bad, I want this. So, I don't know. What we got was great, and what we didn't, I didn't realize we didn't get, so wasn't super terrible. Hindsight's 20/20, is I guess what I'm trying to say, which is not a great argument, but anyway, we're gonna move on. I really liked this movie. Alright, spoiler time. We're moving into spoilers now. There's a time code here. You can skip to that time if you don't want spoilers, but honestly, I'm probably not going to say much after spoilers. So just leave the review now. Just close the video. Leave a like if you don't want spoilers, or dislike. I don't give a shit. Anyway, spoilers now. Okay, references and cameos. I'm going to try and get through all of them that I can remember. Or at least the ones that I remembered right after seeing the movie and wrote these notes. So, let's get into it. Donald Glover's character was kind of kept secret for a while. Everyone was like, are they just throwing Donald Glover a bone because everybody wants him to play Miles Morales? Is he actually playing Miles Morales somehow? Or is he just a guy? Well, he's not. He's like a melding of the two. He plays Aaron Davis, which is the Prowler, also known as Miles Morales' criminal uncle boy. That reveal was so fun to me. He's just buying weapons from the Shocker, and then Spider-Man stops him, and then later they meet up, and there's just this really fun scene where Donald Glover is a Class A actor, as he always is, and then he's like, my name's Aaron Davis. I've got a nephew who lives in Brooklyn, trying to keep him safe. Miles Morales, confirmed. Somewhere. Which I feel like is just that's like the most popular thing in the world now, where if you have if you have a Spider-Man mythos thing that you're starting, you have to mention Miles Morales in some capacity. Like they did it with Spider-Man PS4, where at the end of that trailer, you just see Miles Morales taking a picture, and somebody goes, "Miles!" And then he's like, and then he walks off screen. So yeah, that was fun. Stan Lee's cameo was great, as always. I feel like he said more this time than he normally does. Maybe that's not true, because he said a lot in Guardians 2 with the Watchers, but here he just like interacted with other people, which is strange to me. Which maybe that, I don't know, this one just felt different for some reason. Maybe just because he was interacting with other people on like a first name basis, he felt like he was an actual character, as opposed to just Stan Lee. Because like in the Civil War one, he showed up and talked to Tony Stark, kind of. But, I don't know, it's different, it was good, I liked it, is the point. I'm starting to worry that one of these movies soon will be his last cameo. But we're not going to think about that. We're going to think about how Stan Lee is probably immortal and will never die. Hopefully. Scorpion was in this movie, because why not? And that, so the thing here that I want to talk about briefly is that Amazing Spider-Man 2 and Spider-Man 3 and some other movies are all plagued by the, we need to fit everything into this one movie. For Batman v Superman's another one. We need to fit all these storylines and characters into this one movie because it'll make nerds jizz their pants and go crazy. And the problem with those movies is that they show everything, and it's not just Easter eggs and cameos and setting up for future things. It's just, we're gonna do everything here. And it's kind of a mess. And Amazing Spider-Man 2 kind of handled it a little better, like, because Black Cat was in there, but she didn't become Black Cat. And the Spider Slayer was in there, but he didn't become the Spider Slayer. But then you also have, like, Green Goblin, who's actually Harry Osborn, who becomes Green Goblin. But anyway, in this movie, Scorpion shows up, but he's not Scorpion. He's just Matt Gargan, who's like part of a deal that Vulture's setting up, and he has a little scorpion tattoo, and it's fantastic. And then he shows up again in, I guess I could talk about the mid-credit scene. He shows up again in the mid-credit scene when Vulture is sent to prison, and he's like, "Hey, I got some friends on the outside who want to meet you," which could either mean Sinister Six, or it could just mean like he's got some friends that want to play poker with Michael Keaton. I want to play poker with Michael Keaton. Speaking of like villain cameos, the Tinkerer was here, which was great. And both Shockers were fun. Another cameo from Gwyneth Paltrow, which was strange. I feel like we haven't seen her in like 16 million movies. When's the last time was Avengers the last time we saw Gwyneth Paltrow? No, Iron Man 3 was after Avengers, that's right. But yeah, because she didn't show up in Civil War. She was just mentioned, but she wasn't in Civil War. So that was strange. That whole scene with Pepper, Happy, and Stark, that really made me want an Iron Man 4. It felt like that scene was great. I really loved that scene. The Iron Man fan in me was like, this makes me want a new movie, because it just felt like Peter left and then Iron Man 4 started playing. It was really interesting. The whole tone just kind of shifted back to the first 3 Iron Man movies, which was a lot of fun to watch. But yeah, also Gwyneth Paltrow kind of looked different in this movie. That honestly might just be me. I don't keep up with actors' lives, so who's to say? But like, she came on screen and I was like, what's going on here? Because it looked like she had less freckles. So there was genuinely a second or two where I was like, did they recast Gwyneth Paltrow and think that no one would notice? But then she's very clearly Gwyneth Paltrow. But I don't know, it was very strange to me. I wonder if anybody else had that experience. There was like one part of me that was thinking she got recast, and then another part of me that was thinking that it was a CG version of her, which would have been very strange to me. But no, neither of those is true as far as I know, unless there's some Illuminati shit going on. But yeah, let me know if you also were caught off guard by Gwyneth Paltrow not quite looking like Gwyneth Paltrow for like 3 seconds when she walked out of that door. Also, side note, on like Iron Man's whole appearance here, this is totally unrelated, but this whole movie, because of Iron Man's appearances in it, kind of reminds me of the one-shot comic in Invincible Iron Man, where him and Peter kind of team up and talk about Stark Industries stuff. Or I think it was Yeah, it was Stark Industries at the time, I think. I don't know. It was a long time ago. Matt Fraction's Invincible Iron Man is what I'm talking about. It was a good comic, and the movies draw a lot of inspiration from that and Warren Ellis's Extremis. So I wouldn't be surprised if that specific issue was inspiration for this movie. Okay, so Vulture. I want to talk about Vulture just like as a whole here, because he is a very solid Marvel villain. Not in the comics, like I mentioned earlier. I don't like Vulture in the comics, but here, he was done really well, which is surprising, because Marvel's villains are not great most of the time. But here, solid Marvel villain. We got another good one. I really love that he's called Vulture, because he pretty much is a legit vulture. He goes and steals, like, scraps, tech scraps, in a big bird suit, so he's the Vulture. But yeah, the reason that I think that they so solidly did his character here or him being a villain, is because they didn't make the conflict personal until the third act, which was great. It made it feel like Spider-Man was still new in his career. He's been around for a couple months now, but he's still very new on in his career, and it was really well executed as being an origin story without actually telling Spider-Man's origin story. Because it's the origin story of how Spider-Man becomes Spider-Man, not the origin story of how Peter Parker becomes Spider-Man, which is a very interesting way to handle it, because, you know, superheroes always have, like, two origin stories: their first villain and how they get their powers. And the one that we've been seeing in the movies forever is how they get their powers, along with, their first villain. But now it's just Spider-Man's first big villain, and the way that they deal with that, is just very interesting, where pretty much Peter's just fighting crime. He's just fighting like a force of nature in crime until the third act, where it gets personal with the reveal, the amazing reveal that Vulture is Peter's crush's dad, which is crazy to me. And as like a comic book fan, I feel like they meant to do this, because they never say Liz's last name, as you realize watching the movie. But as a comic book fan, I was like, oh, that's Liz Allen, the white blonde girl who's never really paid attention to in the comics and is sometimes a love interest. And then she shows up and she's just Liz. But I was like, oh, Liz Allen, cool, Liz Allen, Liz Allen, Liz Allen. And then he shows up and I'm like, what the fuck? It's Liz Toombs, bitch. It was crazy. It was a really good reveal. And the way that they shot that, with just Peter, like, barely saying any words and just being so stressed out and anxious, was perfect. They nailed that so much. I think this is what other Marvel movies should look at in terms of making a villain, like, solid. And I don't want to say, I'm going to use Iron Man as an example here, Iron Man's villain, Obadiah Stane. I'm not going to say that that's a bad example of a villain. He's not great, but the problem there, or just different, it's not really the problem there, is because Obadiah Stane was always personal to Tony Stark. Tony Stark always knew about Stane, they always had a personal connection, and they never fought as just hero versus villain. But Spider-Man was always, with Vulture, hero versus villain, up until he opened the door, and Adrian Toombs was standing there, and Peter knew, but he didn't know, but then he figured out on the car ride, and that was a really interesting scene, too. Just to see, like, Peter squirm and Vulture be like, oh, I know what's happening here. But yeah, Vulture is, honestly, he might be the standout in this movie for me, which is so strange coming from me, because I hate Vulture in the comics, like I've mentioned many times so far, but he's just so well executed in this movie. I love him so much. A couple other spoilery things to wrap this up. We figured out who the hell Zendaya's character actually was. There was a lot of speculation going in, because her name was revealed as Michelle, which is not really a comic book source anywhere, but it starts with an M, so people were like, is she Mary Jane? And then everybody got really angry, because if she was Mary Jane, she doesn't have red hair, and oh, you can't have Mary Jane without red hair. Whoa, it's crazy. But she is Mary Jane, so fuck you guys. I'm really glad she's Mary Jane, though, because this is a side of MJ that we don't get to see a lot in the comics, but is definitely there, especially in, like, Ultimate comics, and I think even in Spectacular Spider-Man, kind of, where she's not just, like, supermodel, meh, I'm MJ, actor thing. That's kind of a 616 MJ, traditional version, but in other stories, she's normally like a nerd. Not like super nerdy, but she's kind of a nerd or outcast kind of. And this is like MJ here, again, talking about Zendaya's character, Michelle, she is more Ultimate Gwen than any version of MJ we've seen before. And I like that. I like it, just because, again, I just fell in love with the character, and by the time they were ready to tell us that she was MJ, I was on board. And I don't really care, because, like, traditional MJ's boring anyway. The only reason her character is interesting is because of the history she has with Peter Parker. So, like, she shows up in Invincible Iron Man, the recent one, the Bendis one, just because it's Bendis, and Bendis wants to write Spider-Man characters forever. And she's fine, but, like, she could have been any other character. She could have just been Pepper Potts. So, I don't know. It's strange. But yeah, I really enjoy the reveal that Michelle is MJ. She just kind of was like, and I guess we don't fully have confirmation that she is Mary Jane, but she was just like, my friends call me MJ at the end of the movie. So, I don't know how much more clear they could be, but they show us like her birth certificate. But I don't know. What does it stand for? Michelle Jane? Michelle John. That's her name, Michelle John. Headcanon confirmed. Oh, something more spoilery that I wanted to talk about with character stuff is the version of Peter Parker Spider-Man that we have here. It's something that we haven't really seen before. It's interesting, because we have, right now, currently in the comics, we have the mid-20s something, not super rich, but like rich-ish, tech boy who has all this tech and has lots of long history with villains and everything, and just has a lot of utilities at his disposal. And then we have the traditional version of Spider-Man, which is the very young high schooler who doesn't really have much at his disposal other than the handmade web shooters and this costume that he makes, or MJ makes, or someone makes for him. And the Homecoming Spider-Man that we have here, Tom Holland's Spider-Man, is a very cool melding of the two, because we have the 15-year-old Spider-Man that is still street level and doesn't really know what he's doing, but also we have Tony Stark's suit that is filled with all the tech that he would get later in life anyway when he develops it. So it's a very interesting melding of the two that I really, really like, because basically we're just getting the stuff that we love about street level young Spider-Man and the stuff that we love about mid-20s very successful Spider-Man, and they're put together into this movie, and it creates a very cool version of Spider-Man. Post-credit scene was also a thing, but it really kind of wasn't. It was just Captain America walking out and giving us a silly speech about patience, which was really funny. I feel like post-credit scenes are not... Marvel doesn't care about them anymore. They're more reserved for an extra little Easter egg or a joke, and the mid-credit scenes are really where we get the teases for upcoming movies. Which is interesting, because I feel like we haven't seen, apart from another movie, put into a mid or post-credits in a while. But I could be wrong. But yeah. Oh, also something funny, just personal anecdote about that. I went to a dine-in theater, and there was a lady coming by during the credits who was picking up everybody's checks, and she was telling everyone, "There's nothing after the credits. That's it. You can go away." And I was like, "Okay, thank you," but I was still writing my review, so I was gonna stay anyway. And then Captain America comes up on screen, and she's like, "Oh, okay." So I don't know where she got that from, if it was just hearsay, or if she actually just was like, or maybe the early screening she saw didn't have the post-credit scene. Who knows? Oh, and the ending of the movie is probably one of my favorite endings to a Marvel movie, where it's just this fucking hero shot. It's like the one hero shot we get of Spider-Man, where he gets the suit back, Peter gets the suit back, and he puts it on, and he's like, yeah, and then it pans up, and you see May in the background, and she just goes, what the fuck? But it cuts before she says fuck, because it's a PG-13 movie. They could have said it anyway, because you get one. That's regardless. That's unimportant. But that was awesome. The comedy in that, like the tone of that joke, I wanted more of throughout the film, and we kind of saw that with another cameo, Betty Brant, and Joe Schmo, I don't remember his name. They were doing a, what's it called? Like a high school news broadcast in the morning, and that was the like editing jokes that they did were very subtle in the background, but those were hilarious. And I wanted more of that kind of comedy tone throughout the movie. There you have it, my review of Spider-Man Homecoming. It was fun. I really liked it. I don't care what you have to say, but say it anyway in those comments. I changed the set a little bit around. If it's awful, let me know. If it's not awful, then also let me know. If it's like in between and you're like, I don't give a shit, I just listen to this as a podcast, then let me know as well. Who's to say? We have a Patreon, because of course we do. I'm a YouTube channel, so comes with it. If you want to head on over to patreon.com/Auram, you can get cool rewards for as low as $1 per weekly Saturday video. You could get stuff like cool pictures of my cat, or audio updates that I've been doing that are super fun. Go check them out. Patreon.com/Auram. That all being said, thank you so much for watching. Next time, we do something other than a movie review. I hope we get back to comics soon, but I don't read comics, so it's kind of difficult.